There is a day every trader remembers, not the day of the biggest win, not the day of the worst loss, but the day everything finally makes sense. Not because the market changed, but because you did. Before that day, trading feels noisy, confusing, heavy. Every move feels important. Every loss feels personal. Every win feels like relief. You think the problem is the market, or the strategy, or timing, or luck. But the truth is quieter than that. Day trading does not make sense until your mind stops fighting it. And most people never reach that point because the mind resists what trading demands. Day trading finally makes sense the day you realize it was never about predicting. It was never about catching every move. It was never about being right. It was about behavior. Before that realization, you trade with hope. You hope the move continues. You hope the loss turns around. You hope this one fixes everything. Hope feels good. But hope is what keeps you confused because hope makes you ignore structure, ignore limits, ignore reality. The day trading makes sense is the day you stop hoping and start observing. Observing without attachment, observing without urgency, observing without emotion. You see the market for what it is. Not a promise, not a threat, but a flow that does not care about your needs. Before that day, you think speed is an advantage. You rush to enter. You rush to exit. You rush to recover. You rush to prove. But the day trading makes sense. You realize speed is rarely the edge. Calm is, stillness is, waiting is. You stop feeling pressure to act. You stop feeling late. You stop feeling behind because you understand something important. Opportunities are not rare. Discipline is the market will always move, but you will not always be ready. And readiness has nothing to do with charts. It has everything to do with your state of mind. Before that day, losses feel like failure. You take them personally. They hurt your confidence. They change how you act next. But the day trading makes sense. Losses become information, not judgment, not punishment, just feedback. You no longer ask, why did this happen to me? You ask, what did this teach me about my behavior? That shift changes everything. Because once you stop fighting losses, they lose their power over you. Before that day, you feel like you need to trade often to stay sharp, to stay active, to stay in the game. But the day trading makes sense. You realize activity is not progress. Restraint is. You realize that doing nothing is not wasted time. It is preparation. It is protection. It is discipline. You begin to respect boredom because boredom often means you are not forcing anything. And forcing is what used to cost you money. Before that day, you are always thinking about results, how much you made, how much you lost, how far you are from your goal. But the day trading makes sense. Results move to the background. Behavior moves to the front. You care more about how you traded than what you made because you understand something deeply. Money comes and goes. Behavior compounds. Before that day, emotions drive your decisions. Fear makes you exit early. Greed makes you hold too long. Anger makes you revenge trade. Confidence makes you overtrade. But the day trading makes sense. Emotions are still there. They just stop being in charge. You feel fear, but you do not obey it. You feel excitement, but you do not chase it. You feel frustration, but you pause. This is not emotional control. It is emotional awareness. And awareness gives you choice. Before that day, you are always adjusting, changing things, tweaking rules, looking for something better. But the day trading makes sense. You realize consistency is more powerful than improvement. You stop changing things because you are uncomfortable. You let repetition do its work. You trust time, and trusting time removes pressure. Before that day, you want confidence first. You think once you feel confident, everything will click. But the day trading makes sense. You understand confidence comes last. Discipline comes first. Patience comes next. Confidence grows quietly afterward. You stop waiting to feel ready. You start acting correctly, even when you feel unsure. That is when growth accelerates. Before that day, you think day trading is about outsmarting others, being quicker, being sharper. But the day trading makes sense. You realize it is about outlasting others, staying calm longer, staying disciplined longer, staying consistent longer. Most people lose not because they are wrong, but because they cannot stay stable. Stability is the real edge, and stability is internal. Before that day, you feel like trading is you versus the market, a battle a fight, but the day trading makes sense. You stop fighting. You follow, you align. You respond instead of react. The market stops feeling like an enemy. It feels like a test of discipline. And discipline is something you can train. That day does not arrive suddenly. It arrives quietly, after frustration, after mistakes, after losses, after self-doubt, after reflection. It arrives when you stop asking the market to change and start changing how you show up. That is the day trading finally makes sense, not because it becomes easy, but because it becomes clear. Because once clarity appears, it does not shout, it whispers. And if you are not paying attention, you miss it. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that most of your struggle was not confusion. It was resistance. Resistance to waiting, resistance to loss, resistance to boredom, resistance to uncertainty. You wanted the market to reward effort, but it rewards alignment. You wanted it to respect intelligence, but it respects discipline. You wanted it to feel fair, but it is neutral. Once you accept this, the noise fades. Before this understanding, every moment feels urgent. Every candle feels like a decision. Every pause feels like danger. But now urgency dissolves. You no longer feel pulled into every move. You no longer feel pressure to act. You realize something simple and powerful. Nothing happening is not a problem. It is information. It tells you to wait. It tells you to protect your energy. It tells you to stay out. This is when patience stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like control. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that your job is not to trade. Your job is to decide when not to. Most of your growth comes from the trades you do not take, from the moments you sit on your hands, from the times you walk away, from the discipline you show when no one is watching. Before this, you thought discipline was about rules. Now you understand it is about identity, who you are under pressure, who you are when you are bored, who you are when you feel fear. That identity determines everything. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop asking, what should I do now? And start asking, what kind of trader am I choosing to be right now? That question changes behavior instantly because it shifts you from reaction to intention. You are no longer chasing the market. You are managing yourself. Before this realization, you wanted confirmation. You wanted certainty. You wanted assurance, but the market never gives that. So you learn to operate without it. You accept uncertainty as the cost of opportunity. And once you accept it, it stops feeling threatening. Uncertainty becomes normal, and normal does not create fear. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that losses do not damage you. Your response to losses does. Losses are neutral. They are part of the process. But panic, revenge, self-criticism, those are what create damage. Once you see this clearly, you stop fearing losses. You fear losing control. And that fear is healthy because it keeps you disciplined. Before this understanding, you judged yourself by results. Now you judge yourself by behavior. Did I wait? Did I stop when I should? Did I respect my limits? Did I stay calm? These questions matter more than money because money follows behavior over time. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize you do not need to feel confident. You need to feel stable. Confidence can rise and fall. Stability stays. Stability comes from routine, from structure, from repetition, from showing up the same way, regardless of yesterday. Before this, you were emotional, high after wins, low after losses. Now you aim for neutral. Neutral is powerful. Neutral lets you think clearly. Neutral lets you execute without attachment. Neutral lets you survive long enough to grow. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop trying to impress yourself or others or the market. You stop chasing big days. You stop forcing action. You stop needing excitement. You begin to respect small, clean decisions because small decisions repeated well create consistency, and consistency creates results. Before this, you believed progress should feel obvious. Now you understand progress feels quiet. It shows up as fewer mistakes, shorter recovery time, less emotional reaction, better patience. These changes are subtle, but they are permanent. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that most people are not failing because they are bad. They are failing because they cannot sit with discomfort. They cannot wait. They cannot accept uncertainty. They cannot accept loss. You can. And that is what separates you. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop trying to win today. and start trying to behave correctly today. Winning becomes a side effect, not the goal. This is when the pressure lifts. And when pressure lifts, clarity deepens. The market does not change, but your relationship with it does. You are no longer fighting. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer reacting. You are observing, responding, executing, walking away. This is not exciting. It is professional, and professionalism is what the market rewards. The day trading finally makes sense is the day you realize it was never about mastering the market. It was about mastering yourself. And self mastery is a process, not a moment, not a breakthrough, but a quiet alignment that grows stronger over time. Because once clarity turns into consistency, something else changes. The weight you used to feel begins to lift, not because trading becomes easy, but because it stops feeling personal. Day trading finally makes sense when you no longer feel attacked by the market. Moves against you no longer feel like insults. Missed opportunities no longer feel like punishment. You understand now that the market is not reacting to you. It is simply moving, and that understanding removes emotional noise. Before this point, every session felt like a test of your worth. If you did well, you felt good about yourself. If you did poorly, you questioned everything. But now your sense of self is no longer tied to one day or one trade or one outcome. You separate who you are from what happened, and that separation brings peace. Day trading finally makes sense when peace becomes more important than profit, because peace protects discipline and discipline protects your future. You start to notice how your body feels when you trade. Your breathing is slower, your shoulders are relaxed, your thoughts are quieter. This is not because you are fearless. It is because you are prepared. Preparation removes panic. And panic was what used to make everything feel chaotic. Before this shift, you were always trying to fix something, fix losses, fix confidence, fix mistakes. Now, you focus on maintaining balance. You protect what is already working. You stop trying to improve everything at once. You let repetition strengthen you. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that improvement does not come from constant change. It comes from consistent execution, doing the same simple things well, again and again and again. You begin to trust your routine, not because it guarantees wins, but because it keeps you grounded. Routine becomes your anchor. No matter what the market does, you know what you will do. And knowing that is powerful. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that your edge is not speed, it is patience. It is not prediction. It is restraint. It is not intensity. It is calm focus. You stop admiring traders who are loud and aggressive. You start respecting traders who are quiet and consistent, because now you see the difference. One burns out, the other compounds. Before, you wanted to make trading work for you. Now, you work with it. You align your behavior with its nature. You accept uncertainty instead of fighting it. You accept losses instead of fearing them. You accept waiting instead of resisting it. And acceptance removes friction. Friction was what made trading exhausting. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that you do not need to catch every move. You only need to catch the ones that fit your rules. And missing moves no longer hurts, because you trust there will be another. Scarcity thinking disappears. Abundance thinking replaces it. Not abundance of money, abundance of opportunity. This changes how you act. You are no longer desperate. You are selective. Selection is strength. Before this, you thought discipline was about saying no to bad trades. Now you understand it is about saying no to yourself, to impulses, to emotions, to urgency. That is much harder, but that is where mastery lives. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop asking, what if I'm wrong? And start asking, what if I stay disciplined? Wrong trades do not hurt disciplined traders. Undisciplined reactions do. This shift removes fear. Fear no longer controls you. It informs you. You listen. You pause. You decide. Day trading finally makes sense when your focus moves from outcome to execution. Execution is something you can always improve. Outcome is not. By focusing on execution, you regain control, and control creates confidence, real confidence, the kind that does not disappear after a loss, the kind that does not inflate after a win, the kind that stays steady. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that your job ends when the trade is placed. After that, patience takes over. You stop managing from emotion. You let your plan work or fail. Either way, you stay calm. This calm is not passive, it is intentional. It is earned. Before this point, you thought trading success looked exciting. Now you see it looks boring, quiet, repetitive, predictable in behavior, not an outcome. And that is comforting because predictability in behavior means stability. And stability is what allows growth. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that most people never reach this stage, not because it is hidden, but because it requires humility. It requires letting go of ego, letting go of urgency, letting go of the need to be right. Many people would rather feel important than be consistent. You choose consistency, and that choice changes everything. You are no longer chasing the feeling of winning. You are building the habit of behaving well, and that habit starts to pay you back. Slowly, quietly, reliably, day trading finally makes sense when you feel less emotional at the screen and more confident away from it. You can walk away without stress. You can miss a session without panic. You can end the day without replaying everything. That mental freedom is worth more than any single win because it allows you to come back tomorrow clear, and clarity is what keeps you in the game. You understand now that trading was never meant to be dramatic. It was meant to be managed, and management requires maturity. You have been growing into that maturity all along through frustration, through mistakes, through confusion, through reflection, and now it begins to show not in huge wins, but in calm behavior. And calm behavior is the sign that day trading finally makes sense because when understanding settles in deeply, it stops being something you think about. It becomes something you live. Day trading finally makes sense when you no longer need constant reminders to stay disciplined. Not because discipline is easy, but because it has become familiar. You know the feeling of rushing now. You recognize it early. You know the feeling of fear rising. You notice it without reacting. You know the urge to force a trade and you let it pass. This is not talent. This is awareness trained over time. Before, you thought successful traders were fearless. Now you see they are simply aware, aware of their limits, aware of their emotions, aware of when to act and when to step back. That awareness is what keeps them consistent. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop asking the market to reward you. You no longer expect anything from it. You show up prepared. You execute when conditions align. You walk away when they do not. No negotiation, no frustration, no attachment. And because you expect nothing, you are no longer disappointed. Disappointment was a result of expectation. Without expectation, you stay calm. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that patience is not passive. It is active discipline. It is choosing not to act when acting would feel good but be harmful. It is choosing to protect capital instead of chasing excitement. It is choosing to stay flat when your emotions want action. This kind of patience is powerful. It keeps you alive long enough to grow. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that consistency is not about perfect days. It is about imperfect days handled well. Days where nothing works, but you still respect your limits. Days where you miss opportunities, but you do not chase. Days where you feel off and you stop early. Those days build more skill than winning days ever could. Before this understanding, you feared bad days. Now you respect them because they test your discipline. And discipline tested under pressure is discipline you can trust. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that your edge is invisible. It is not something you can show. It is not something you can explain easily. It is how you behave when nothing is clear, how you act when nothing is happening, how you respond when things go against you. That edge cannot be copied. It must be built. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop needing to tell anyone about your trading. You no longer need validation. You no longer need praise. You no longer need to prove progress. You know what you are building, and quiet confidence replaces loud hope. Day trading finally makes sense when you feel okay ending the day flat, not excited, not disappointed, just neutral. Neutral is powerful. Neutral means you did not force anything. Neutral means you stayed in control. Neutral means you respected the process. Those flat days used to frustrate you. Now you see them as successful days because success is no longer measured by money. It is measured by discipline. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that survival is the first win. Staying in the game, protecting your capital, protecting your mind, protecting your discipline. Without survival, nothing else matters. Most traders never learn this early enough. You did. Day trading finally makes sense when you accept that growth is slow by design. If it were fast, it would destroy you. If it were easy, it would not last. Slow growth gives you time to adapt, time to mature, time to build emotional strength, time to make mistakes without being wiped out. Time is not your enemy. It is your ally now. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop feeling late. You are no longer racing anyone. You are building something personal, something sustainable, something that fits who you are becoming. You no longer measure yourself against others. You measure yourself against yesterday's behavior. And that comparison is healthy. Day trading finally makes sense when you see that the market is not a place to be emotional. It is a place to be professional. Professional does not mean cold. It means controlled. It means prepared. It means consistent. You bring emotions into life. You bring discipline into trading. That separation changes everything. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that the hardest part was never learning the market. It was learning yourself, your triggers, your habits, your fears, your impatience, your need for certainty. Once you understand those, the market becomes simple, not predictable, but manageable. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that mistakes never disappear. They just become smaller, less damaging, easier to recover from, and recovery becomes faster because you do not panic anymore. You adjust, you learn, you move on. Day trading finally makes sense when you feel less pressure to be right and more commitment to be disciplined. Being right is temporary. Discipline compounds. You choose compounding. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop trying to control outcomes and start controlling exposure, exposure to risk, exposure to emotion, exposure to fatigue. That control protects you, and protection allows consistency. Day trading finally makes sense when you no longer feel like quitting after a bad day, because bad days no longer define you. They are part of the process. They pass. You remain, and remaining is the real victory. One day, you will look back and realize something quietly powerful. Trading did not suddenly become clear because you learned more. It became clear because you changed. You became calmer, more patient, more disciplined, more honest, more self aware. That is why day trading finally makes sense. Not because the market revealed a secret, but because you became someone who could understand it. And that understanding does not leave, it deepens, it strengthens, it carries you forward quietly, steadily, over time. That is the day trading finally makes sense. And that is the day your real journey begins. Because once this way of thinking settles in, it stops feeling like a lesson. It becomes your default state. You no longer wake up wondering how the market will treat you. You wake up knowing how you will behave. And that certainty is the real breakthrough. Day trading finally makes sense when your mood no longer depends on what the market does. A winning day does not inflate you. A losing day does not crush you. You remain steady, and steadiness is rare. That is why it is rewarded. Before, you were always searching for confidence. Now you understand confidence was never something to find. It was something to earn, earned through repetition, through restraint, through discipline on days when nothing happens, through calm on days when everything goes wrong. That confidence does not shout. It does not need to. It shows up as trust in yourself. Day trading finally makes sense when you trust yourself more than your emotions. You trust that you will stop when you should. You trust that you will not chase. You trust that you will walk away when conditions are not right. That trust removes anxiety, and anxiety was what made trading feel overwhelming. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that the market does not need your opinion. It does not need your prediction. It does not need your hope. It only responds to your actions. And your actions are finally aligned with discipline. You stop trying to impose your will. You respond to what is there. That shift feels like relief because you are no longer carrying the burden of control. Day trading finally makes sense when you accept that you will never eliminate uncertainty and you stop trying to, you make peace with it. You plan around it. You respect it. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger. It feels like the environment, and you have learned how to operate inside it. Day trading finally makes sense when your energy lasts longer. You are not drained after sessions. You are not mentally exhausted because you are no longer fighting. You are flowing. You act when needed. You wait when needed. You rest when needed. This balance keeps you sharp. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop thinking in extremes. You are no longer chasing huge days. You are no longer afraid of small losses. You think in averages, in balance, in sustainability. This mindset removes desperation. And desperation was what made everything feel urgent before. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that most traders never reach this stage, not because it is hidden, but because it requires patience most people do not want to give. It requires humility. It requires letting go of ego. It requires accepting slow growth. You chose to stay. You chose to learn. You chose to change. That choice matters. Day trading finally makes sense when you feel okay doing less. You no longer feel guilty for waiting. You no longer feel behind when you do nothing. You know that waiting is part of the work. And sometimes it is the most important part. Day trading finally makes sense when you understand that success is not dramatic. It is quiet. It looks like routine. It feels like calm. It sounds like silence. And that silence is comforting now because it means nothing is being forced. Day trading finally makes sense when you no longer fear mistakes. You respect them. You learn from them. You recover from them quickly. Mistakes stop being threats. They become part of the process. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop needing to ask, am I good at this? And start knowing, I am disciplined at this. Skill can fluctuate, discipline holds. Day trading finally makes sense when you see that profitability is not a moment, it is a condition created by consistent behavior over time. You are no longer waiting for a breakthrough day. You are building a breakthrough life. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that the hardest work was invisible. It happened in your thinking, in your reactions, in your patience, in your restraint. And because it was invisible, you once doubted it. Now you feel it in your calm, in your clarity, in your control. Day trading finally makes sense when you stop feeling like you need to escape your life through trading and start using trading as a disciplined part of your life. Balanced, measured, intentional. That is when it becomes sustainable. Day trading finally makes sense when you no longer ask the market for permission to feel okay. You feel okay because you behaved well. And that feeling cannot be taken away by a single outcome. Day trading finally makes sense when you realize that this understanding did not arrive by accident. It came from every mistake, every frustrating day, every moment you wanted to quit but stayed, every time you chose discipline over impulse. Those moments built this clarity quietly, patiently, properly. And now you carry it with you, not as a rule book, not as a system, but as a mindset that keeps you grounded, a mindset that keeps you patient, a mindset that keeps you in control. This is the moment trading stops being confusing, stops being heavy, stops being emotional, and starts being manageable, professional, clear. That is the day day trading finally makes sense. And from this point forward, the journey is no longer about figuring it out. It is about continuing to show up as the trader you have become, calm, disciplined, consistent, and ready every single day.